Fitchburg City Council budget hearings. Tonight we have on board the Public Works Department, the Water Enterprise Division, and the Wastewater Enterprise Division. One correction on tonight's agenda, the third item down says Public Facilities Division, and the Public Facilities Division is now under the Building Department, so that won't be reviewed tonight. That'll be reviewed on Monday with the Board of Health. So moving to page 37. Public Works, Administrative Engineering and Planning, $378,849. Animal Control, $38,736. Cemetery, $205,530. Highway, $1,666,765. Parks, $224,624. Snow and ice, $400,000. Total Public Works, $2,914,504. We're starting off on page 38 with the Public Works Administration, Engineering, and Planning. Mr. Laxo.
Okay, thank you. I can take a minute and just go over some of our accomplishments and goals, if you'd like.
Okay.
During the past year, the Highway Division successfully handled two major storms, Tropical Storm Irene and the October nor'easter. After the initial emergency period, when contractors helped us to get the streets open during the October snowstorm, the Highway Division removed all of the brush piles themselves. Unlike many communities that hired outside contractors, this avoided putting the city at risk at the percentage of the costs that are not reimbursed by FEMA. And FEMA told us that the contractor that everybody was using, who happened to be on the state bid list, was very expensive, so we saved both the city and FEMA a good deal of money. The Highway Division also successfully constructed the Scott Road Bridge, and the cost was fully reimbursed by Mass DOT. So because of our good track record, we have a good chance of getting a grant to pave most of Ringe Road this summer, so we expect to hear about that fairly soon. Thanks to new personnel, software, and hardware, DPW is now capable of designing and specifying small projects so that we do not have to hire consultants for everything, and this will result in considerable savings for the city. We are continuing to look critically at in-house at past dam inspection reports, finding in many cases that size and hazard classifications were overstated. This will save the city hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in dam repairs that can be either scaled down or eliminated altogether. The Cemetery Division has selected a firm to create a master plan which will address important issues such as the time remaining before Forest Hill runs out of space and how to best make use of the parcel of land owned by the cemetery on the other side of Electric Avenue. We've been integrating some of the former Community Development Division into DPW, so we're working closely together on CDBG projects and site plan reviews, and we're in the early stages of planning improvements to Water Street, downtown, and the John Fitch Highway. Our crews are well motivated and morale is high. New workers have come in with good skills and a work ethic to match. Some of our employees took advantage during the past year of opportunities to transfer to different positions within DPW, which is something that we encourage if they're looking for a change, while others are taking the time to earn the licenses that are needed to advance to the next level. The accomplishments that I mentioned earlier are in large part due to the effort that our workers make to think out of the box and work as a team to solve problems. Just a few budget highlights in administration, engineering, and planning. The civil engineering position was paid 100% by enterprise funds last year, but the DPW General Fund needs access to these services, especially for stormwater issues and solving other problems that may come up. Stormwater is another EPA issue that is just around the corner, and every city and town is going to have to deal with the costs when the new stormwater permit is issued, which we expect to happen sometime in the next year. In clerical, there used to be 2 clerks in DPW, so the one remaining clerk has a heavy workload. The position should be upgraded to head clerk rather than principal clerk, so we plan to post the position accordingly. Concerning animal control, as you know, the animal control officer is being transferred to the police department. That's a much better fit, since this really deals with law enforcement issues that the DPW can't really provide adequate support for. And now that we've had a part-time assistant for the past 2 months, we can see that it will make sense to separate the animal control function completely from the shelter. We are developing policies and procedures that there are clear lines of responsibilities between the two functions, allowing animal control to devote more time where she's needed on the street, and allowing the assistant to focus on the shelter, care of dogs, and coordinating with volunteers. This should also cut down considerably on animal control overtime, since the only overtime down the road would be to respond to off-hours calls rather than dealing with issues at the shelter. In the cemetery, we reinstated the cemetery superintendent position recently, as spelled out in the city code. There used to be both a superintendent and a clerk at the cemetery, but the superintendent position was eliminated maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Running a cemetery is a full-time job, and the superintendent of streets cannot give it the time that it needs. So it evolved over the years that the clerk ended up managing the cemetery, and it was unfair to this individual to be performing management duties as a clerk, so we posted and hired the cemetery superintendent. In the streets and garage budget, we've maintained the 3 positions that were added in the supplemental budget in fiscal year 12. This has been a great help to DPW and the city, enabling us to perform more of the tasks in our neighborhood that need to be addressed, such as repairing fences and sidewalks, cleaning catch basins, sweeping streets, picking up brush, things that often fell by the wayside due to lack of manpower. I'd also like to point out that the budget again requires that we offset $90,000 in DPW labor on CDBG projects. This is difficult for the department, as we are unable to work on needed tasks out on the streets while we're devoting time to these projects. Although the projects are needed and they do benefit the city and they're good projects, it will relieve the pressure on the department when we can fully utilize our crews. You'll also notice that the streetlight budget is at $225,000, which is the same as last year's original budget. This would not be adequate to fund the lights that we currently have on for the full fiscal year, just as in fiscal year 12, but we're confident that we will purchase the streetlights this year. Although the price has not been finalized, we don't think the gap is insurmountable, and over the past year, we pretty much worked out the language in the purchase and sale agreement and the license agreements with Unitil, so things should move forward once we finalize the purchase price. Once we own the lights, and we'll be able to realize savings in maintenance, and we'll be able to start a retrofit program to use energy-efficient lights. For example, a year or two we converted the Fifth Street Bridge lights to LEDs, and that realized a 72% savings in energy, which translated to about a 50% cost savings. So if you have any questions.
Councilor Di Natale, just before we get started, I'm sorry, in chambers tonight we have Councilor Bean, Councilor Reynolds, Councilor Carboni, Councilor Boisvert, Councilor Di Natale, Councilor Caddy, and Councilor Clark. Sorry, councilors.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Laxo, how many parks employees do you have?
4.
4. How many cemetery?
4, including the superintendent, plus part-timers.
How many part-timers?
Right now, I believe we have 2 in the cemetery, and we also have 2 in the parks that help out at Cogswell Park. Now that the Stone House is open, it takes considerable time on weekends to open and close the doors and the gates and clean up the trash and get things ready for the next.
We have 4 parks people for all the parks in the city.
That's right.
And we continue to create or add parks that we rely on your staff to maintain with 4 people. How many parks in the city do we have?
It's around 35 or so.
35 parks, 4 people. Okay. Okay.
We've had a challenge cutting grass.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
So we had numerous complaints from the Youth Soccer League about Coolidge Park, so we got that done today, but this time of year, it's tough to keep up.
I know it's not a lack of effort, it's a lack of manpower. It's
Right.
plain and simple. 4 people for 35 parks. That's ridiculous. My second question is, you stated about the streetlights, that the 225 that is budgeted for FY13, that will not cover the additional lights that were assumed by the city to be paid by us. I recall last fiscal year, we had a budgeted money, and then a couple of weeks ago, we had an appropriation for $40,000 to pay Unitil for lights that they weren't billing us for, that they should have been, and also to cover the cost of the city reassuming the bills for those who are already paying for the lights. Are you saying, so if we're getting the same amount for the start of this fiscal year, are those residents going to have to go back and pay for their lights? And, I mean, it seems to me like with the overtime accounts, that approach doesn't make sense, because we just had a request to supplement that streetlight account to cover bills that were outstanding, because the city administration decided to assume payment of those additional lights. Now the mayor is proposing we budget the same amount, when we already know for a fact, barring no purchase of the lights, that we're going to need more than 225. We're going to have lights be operating without requisite funding for it.
That's correct. We'd be in the same situation late fiscal year 13 as we were in fiscal year 12 if the lights aren't purchased by the city.
I have a problem with that, because, again, we don't know what the future holds. It's a risk, because if free cash is not abundant, we're going to be at a point at that time where we're going to be in trouble. I mean, I just don't feel comfortable from a business perspective of knowing that our bill is a lot higher than 225, but we're budgeting 225. I don't like that. I would prefer that if we were going to be paying for those lights, that the budget reflect exactly the amount of lights we're paying for right now. Doesn't make any sense to me why it would be dropped for a future appropriation. I understand that the street light purchase is still ongoing, but you're hoping to have that finalized. There was one expert who came before us and gave a lengthy presentation. That is the only time, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, that is the only time I have gotten any comprehensive information from anybody to reassure me that by purchasing the lights, this will save a tremendous amount of money, and that the city can afford to maintain all 3,000-plus lights on its own dime. I haven't seen a formal presentation from the administration or from your office showing us the pros and cons and the cost comparison. I know it was in that presentation we got well over a year ago, but I haven't seen anything since. And I'm afraid that the city is negotiating, they're going to reach an agreement, and then I'm going to feel like my back's to the wall, where it'd be foolish not to support it. But I would like to have that detailed financial information before I agree to supplement the streetlight account by purchasing it. Because my concern has always been, the city has a hard time maintaining things it owns already. So I'd like to see a comprehensive plan and a financial analysis on the impact the city will have by maintaining, operating, and repairing 3,000-plus lights. I'd like to know how the city's going to do that, since we have a hard time already maintaining buildings, parks, because of lack of resources. I would ask that be communicated to the mayor, that we get something like that before, in my opinion, before the dotted line is signed.
Yeah, we can put that together for you.
Thank you.
I mean, the savings comes in the maintenance costs, where instead of Unitil doing the maintenance, we would hire a private company at a much lower rate to do the same thing.
Okay, so private company would be hired, it wouldn't be city employees doing it?
No.
Okay.
And
Thank
now
you.
that a number of towns have purchased their streetlights, there are several companies out there that do this now.
I would still hope that we get a detailed packet prior to any vote, because that would help me make a better decision. Thank you.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lenny, are we still using Mr. Woodbury as a consultant on the streetlight situation?
Yes, we are. Mhm.
Okay, and we're still, okay, so we're kind of taking his lead, as we have from when we first met him.
Yes, he's the one who wrote the legislation that makes it possible, so
Right.
he's the expert in the field.
What are the chances if, during the next fiscal year, that we do buy the lights in the next fiscal year? 70%? 80%? 50%? You got a round ball on that?
You mean the odds that we'll
The
purchase-
odds that the city purchase the lights?
I mean, I think the odds are very good. I mean, I hate to throw a number at it, but it should be able to happen in the next, before the end of this calendar year, I would say.
That's fine. And I would agree with Council Di Natale if maybe Mr. Woodbury could come at some chance and give us an update on something like that. I think the council would like to hear that, especially from him. To be honest with you, he puts on a good show. I mean, like you said, he wrote the particular law and knows everything about it, so I would like to hear from him again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Reynolds.
Lenny, I recently went to Fitchburg High School and sat in on an energy audit class. It was very impressive, and the gentleman who had come from Connecticut to teach there at the high school, there seems to be a generation after the LED lights. Are you aware of any city lights that are even more effective than the current LED lights?
Yeah. I spoke with George Woodbury a couple weeks ago, and he just went out to the streetlight convention, and he did report back that the cost of LED lights are considerably less than they were even 2 or 3 years ago, but he didn't mention any new technologies.
Well, this gentleman recommended lights that cost like $25 or $27 per light to replace the bulbs in your home, where we had moved to those spirally kind of lights. But this is something after that, and the technology may be there to save a great deal in the future, I hope.
Yeah, we'll look into that.
Councilor Bean.
Commissioner, you didn't mention roads, and that was something I was interested in. I don't know if we have a road paving program or not, or if we've had one in the past 5 years, so. I live on a country road, and I can tell you my road hasn't done it in a number of years. Could you just give me your thoughts on where the city is on road improvements, both on the country road area and on the inner city roads? I know there are two different types of mixes you can use and two different techniques you could use, but is there any money in the budget? Are we planning on using free cash money? What are the plans for doing road? We don't have a road plan, do we?
Well, we do have a plan in the sense that we evaluate the pavement condition index of every single road in the city. It was done completely 3 years ago, and we're updating the list in it, and we plan on presenting to the council the difference between 3 years ago and today, because it's certainly not getting any better, because we fall further and further behind every year. I mean, we have the Chapter 90 program. We rely completely on that for our paving budget. We don't apply any city funds to that.
I haven't seen an aggressive road program for a number of years, and I'm just wondering when we will see one to catch up, because, for 3 years planning and putting it a list is one thing, but those 3 years we should have been paving streets is my concern.
The funding is the challenge. I mean, we have roughly 200 miles of streets in the city, and if we paved every street every 20 years, we'd have to pave 10 miles every year, but we can only pave maybe 2.5 miles per year with the Chapter 90 money that we get, so that's 7.5 miles short every year, so it keeps getting worse.
Okay.
Meanwhile, we continue to chase other funding sources, like getting projects on the tip. Ashby State Road will be done from the roundabout to Iron Hall Farm Road in a couple of years, and we're working with Lunenburg and Leominster on Summer Street, that'll be a joint project funded by the TIP.
Have you had discussions with the mayor about either bond issue or some way of funding a road program? Or has the capital improvements, have you been part of the capital improvements committee? Have they looked at it? I'm just, if we don't start attacking it soon, it's just going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, the capital improvement plan shows that we should be paving 5 miles of road every year. A funding source hasn't been identified for that. They've also recommended recently that we try to...
Funding hasn't been a priority, I guess would be the word, right? I mean, we have a large budget, just hasn't been prioritized to use funds for that road.
I mean, the proposal that the mayor has made the last 2 years was to do a debt exclusion override to fund paving, roughly 5 miles per year, I think it was, or...
Is that coming again before, so you don't know? I'm just trying to get a sense of where we're going with roads.
Since last year, no.
Okay. So to be fair to, I guess I'll use the Councilor Clark's thing, is there a 50% chance we'll have some roads paved this year, or 80% chance, or is it, or how would you?
I mean, we'll definitely get the Chapter 90 money spent as soon as it clears the state legislature. It's hung up there right now, so we're all holding our breaths that the money will be available on July 1st.
Okay. I just want to voice my concern about a road program, and hopefully we can get one together. Thank you.
Your highway, you've added 3 people to your budget this year in the highway division?
Yes, those positions were added in fiscal year 12 through the supplemental budget.
Now, where does that bring you in how long have you been in as the commissioner?
3.5 years.
Is that 3 positions, have they been taking positions away? I know we've funded positions for several years that never got filled, but are you considering to be fully staffed now? Or what is your staffing level and where do you think it should be?
Well, we're still nowhere fully staffed. I mean, we're just a fraction of what the DPW was in past decades. We could still use 3 more people, at least in the highway division. That's what we proposed last year, and, parks and cemeteries are shorthanded as well. We could easily use another person in each one of those in the short term.
And you doubled your budget for hiring summer help this year?
Are you talking parks or cemeteries?
It's 22,000 summer help.
They were both increased.
Is that just to keep up, or should that be in the cemetery? It shows that you doubled the budget.
In the cemeteries, we wanted to keep 3 summer positions. We used to have 6 not too long ago. That's down to 3 now, but we do have quite a bit of help from community service and from the state prisoners, which are a big help, so we don't think we need 6 summer positions anymore, but we would like them to stay on longer into the season just to keep the grounds up. It's important that we keep the cemetery attractive, both out of respect for the people who use it and just to keep people interested in utilizing Forest Hill rather than go someplace else.
When will most of them be hired?
Well, we have 2 right now, and then, if the budget goes through, we would bring on another one for a couple months this season, and then bring them on in April next year.
Is there an issue with the, lawnmowers or anything like that this year because I've noticed that the grass is high?
No, we just bought new lawnmowers with the equipment bond from last year, so that's not the issue. It's just manpower. We have one of our parks employees keeps getting called to the federal grand jury, so we've lost him, and at the same time we're getting the pool ready for I think it opens around June 18th, so that takes manpower also.
Okay. Counselor Reynolds.
Lenny, Commissioner, I passed Laurel Hill Cemetery recently, and it looks fabulous. I even stopped the car and clapped, and it was really, that's so difficult with its hills. There's a Fitchburg folk saying, a couple of things that I've heard for years, decades actually. The first one might be a little bit put to rest now, was that Fitchburg isn't business friendly here in the City Hall. The second one is, how people say to me, and I've heard through the years, how can we leave Fitchburg and the roads are immediately better? For example, a recent person said, going up Ringe Road, when we hit Ashburnham, Ringe Road is much better. I've heard other people say, how come as soon as we hit New Hampshire, the roads are better? So I believe I asked the same question of you last time you appeared last year. Is there a process of building roads that we might look at that would produce a better road? You got into it a little bit last year, but does New Hampshire do something differently from us? Does Ashburnham do something differently from us?
Well, as far as Ringe Road goes, both Ashby and Ashburnham received state STRAP grants, they call them, Small Town Road Assistance Program. So in 2010, Ashburnham was able to pave their part of Ringe Road, and last year Ashby did their part. And what I hinted at earlier was we're hoping to get a grant to do our section of Ringe Road this year, but I asked today if I could make any announcements, so they told me not to, so I've probably said too much already.
But that explains, do they use the exact same process we do of road building?
Yes, but one thing, we have our paving contract for the next 3 years out for bid now, and we've changed the mix design to something called Super Pave, which should be more durable. What happened was in recent years, the asphalt business changed a little bit, where they're now recycling old pavement, and they're able to take credit for the asphalt content in the recycled pavement, but we're finding out that it's not really holding up as well as fresh pavement used to. But we're hoping that with this new mix design, our pavement will last longer than what has happened in recent years.
But do New Hampshire, do they dig beds deeper, or is there some other step that they take that we don't take?
Yeah, I'm not sure if their methods are any different, or if it's just a matter of funding. I know that the state committed a lot of its future federal aid money to pay off the big digs, so that kind of hurts the whole state as far as getting the federal aid roads paved.
Councilor Di Natale.
Commissioner, how many employees in the highway department do you have currently?
Hang on one second. I don't want to say it off the top of my head. Uh, 21.5, including the people in the garage.
That includes the garage. How many are in the garage?
3.
So you've got 18.5 that are on the road.
Yes.
Okay. And then you have 3 garage employees. How about in engineering?
9.
And you said cemetery was 4 and parks was 4. Full-time. I'm not talking part-time helpers or anything.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
So that's, boots on the ground, that's 38.5 people. The cemetery and parks area is a bigger concern to me than the highway, because it's not only the 35 parks that we own and operate, it's the cracks in the sidewalks, it's the weeds that grow in public areas that are not parks, like, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but they're all over the place. And it's entirely due to a lack of manpower, I understand that, but it's like the street lights for a lot of people, where it's an image issue. It doesn't look clean, it doesn't look, it doesn't look good, And it's no fault of your employees or yourself, it's just, it's a fact that it doesn't look good. And my question is, with the grossly low number of people you have to maintain 35 parks and all the other areas of the city that are not parks that have overgrown weeds, bushes, what have you, how are we deploying, I chuckle because I don't know how do we deploy 4 people to cover all that? I mean, what's the strategy? Because I feel like it's not going to get done at all, no matter how much time you have, because you don't have any bodies.
Yeah, I mean, they just have a rotation where they, they make their rounds from park to park to park. Sometimes, as in the case of Coolidge, where it gets more frequent use and they have teams playing there, then, they're not happy if the grass doesn't get mowed for the next set of games.
So, because I'll admit straight up that at the supplemental budget, I didn't support the added employees, only because I wasn't convinced at the time that they can be sustained long-term. That's always my concern when we add more people, is not that it's not needed, it's can we keep them for 5, 6, 7 years? Are we positive? I know the employees in DPW aren't paid, in my opinion, very well, considering all the efforts that they have. I will say that in your department, especially in you and Gary's neck of the woods, the responses are lightning fast, and you guys take care of it. Any issue that I've ever called you about is taken care of lightning fast, which is very impressive. And it's a testament to you, the superintendent, and to the guys on the ground. It's fantastic work for what you guys have. This really bothers me because I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to help the mayor fix this. I don't know how to help you fix this, because it is absolutely ridiculous that we have 4 people to operate 35 parks and miles of other territory that aren't parks that have overgrowth. It's a big concern, because I'm very concerned that we're not going to get a lot done with that kind of manpower. And I think it's been a recurring theme every year, but I didn't realize how many parks we had. 35 is a lot. And I guess my only question is, with that low staffing, how are we utilizing the bodies we have? How do we strategize how to deploy them? I mean, is it just one after another? Or, because do the parks and cemetery workers, do they ever get called out to do highway work?
Not generally during the, the summer season. During the winter, of course, they can help out with snow plowing and sidewalk plowing, things like that.
Okay.
What's really saved us in the past few years with manpower so low is the help we're getting from community service and inmates.
How many, I'm just curious, how many parks employees would be an acceptable number to cover 35 parks and all the other miles of ground that we should be maintaining? Just,
Yeah,
we're at 4 now, where should we be? Like, what's an acceptable level?
Off the top of my head, I'd like to double what we have now.
Double? 8? Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Boisvert.
Thank you. A few subjects have been touched on, but I want to reiterate a couple things. Number one, we are maintaining over 200 miles of roads. I don't know how many catch basins, which are 3,000, I think, somewhere around there, in all the parks, line painting, maintenance on the equipment. I think we're blessed to have so many devoted employees in the Public Works Department, and talented. And to take anything away from this budget is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. If we had the power to do it, I'd like to double this budget, at least double it, and give the Public Works Department, bring them back up to a staff of 35 to 40 people, because we have enough work to that we would need that many people to maintain what we're doing. It's beyond me how the number of people that we have on the boots on the ground, as they say, how they can maintain all this. It's just mind-boggling. You know, I mean, these people have got to be very talented and very hard-working and devoted people. To take anything away from this budget is insane. Like I say, we don't have the power to do it, but if we did, I'd like to double this budget. Thank you.
Councilor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Concur with colleagues that there's understaffed and underfunded, and they do the best they can. I appreciate that. I'm just asking for some clarification here, Lenny. On page 38, the way this is laid out, and I'm just trying to clarify for myself, under admin, engineering, and planning personal services, you get a whole bunch of people who get a percentage here and a percentage there, so I'm just clarifying for myself here. Just as an example, civil engineer, 10% from the general fund, okay? Budget is 76,752. You with me?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so we only pay 10% of that out of the general fund. The remaining 90% comes out of the parentheses 390,248 that is down below, which is less CDBG, home, all of that. Is that correct?
That's right, and in this case, it's the enterprise funds that pay most of that position's salary.
Yeah, so, but we've got a whole bunch of different ones here, you know, planner, 10% from general fund, CDBG, is 0, okay. The people who are percentaged, some from one place, some from the other, their total compensation isn't any more than that number that's written there in that budget, is that correct? So just as an example, junior engineer, it says 90 is from the general fund at 51,116. He doesn't make more than 51,116.
No, that's his...
He or she.
That's his full salary.
Okay, you know, each one of those, that is their full compensation that's in that column.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Carbone.
Back to parks. What does Pittsburgh State cover? Because I know they own a couple of the fields at Coolidge. What of that work do they do? Just the softball field or anything else?
Yeah, they do maintain the softball fields. In fact, they just completely reconstructed one of the softball fields last year, and eventually that will get turned over to the city at no cost to the city until they can build a permanent field somewhere else. But they do maintain the fields that they use for their teams.
And what are the major parks your employees go to? I'm guessing Park Hill and Coolidge are probably the two main. But I was at North Street for the cleanup, and along with a friend of mine, we basically cleaned up the whole park. And I guess it's just a shock to see that there's only 4 people going back and forth. So is that true that they only hit, you know, the 2 major parks, I would say?
I mean, they do devote a good share of their time to Coggeshall, Coolidge, and Park Hill, but they do make the rounds to the other parks, especially on Mondays after the weekend, because if the weather is nice, then the trash barrels are always overflowing by the end of the day, Sunday.
Is there a way I can get a schedule of which parks get cleaned when?
Yeah, we can try to get that to you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councilor Reynolds.
Just a comment, piggybacking on what Councilor Boivin said, and also Councilor Di Natale. They both recognize, and I assume the other councilors have some degree of recognition, that this needs to be further funded, and we need more help. And while we can't order it or make it happen, we could certainly suggest to the mayor, as we have in the past when we've caused a lot of talk about adding policemen, the strong pressure we put on the mayor to increase policemen, firemen. I think the mayor would be amenable to having some changes here and adding money to this department as well, if we recommended it strongly.
Councilor Hay.
Thank you. Lenny, just passing here on page 38 is new position where you have clerical 90% general fund. Oh, no. Where is it? I just lost it. I'm sorry. Oh, okay, the administrative assistant that was there? Yeah. You with me?
Right?
That was 15,502. And then we have program management assistant. Is that a part-time position that was made full-time?
Do you want to explain that?
Sure. No, actually, that was a full-time position that was amended. The job description was changed slightly when the restructuring of several city departments took place. So the program management position was previously a full-time position. Its job duties changed somewhat, but it remains a full-time position.
So then you lost an administrative assistant?
Well, we lost, referring to the former Community Development Department, we lost 2 administrative assistants.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. How many, Mr. Laxo, how many, or Mr. Casassa, how many planning employees are there in the city? Or I should ask, how many planning employees are under your jurisdiction, Mr. Laxo?
Let's see, we have 3 planners.
3 planners? Full-time?
Yes.
Mr. Casassa, how many on top of that in other areas? Beyond the 3 under his jurisdiction?
Involved in,
Planning activities?
well, really, the city has just the principal planner position dedicated to what is traditionally known as planning activities in the community, providing support for the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and other activities. The other positions that are titled planner can just as easily be called community development because it's primarily grants administration and projects administration work that they do. So I would, they're essentially the same positions that formerly, and the same job duties that formerly had different job titles under community development, but they were never really pure planning positions.
We had a planning department a few years ago.
Yes.
How many people were in that department at that time?
We had about 10 to 11 people depending
10 to
on-
11 people.
Yes.
And then when the restructuring was done, more than once, the head of the planning office was disbanded, and all the employees were spread throughout other departments under different jurisdictions, correct?
That's correct.
So the 10 to 11 is now what? Across everywhere, including Mr. Laxo. He said 3. How many above 3?
There are two people, well, the original planning office also did community development and did housing. The two housing persons, two full-time housing persons now work under the Board of Health.
Right.
I mentioned earlier we lost 2 administrative assistant positions, but the remaining staff who do the planning, the 3 planner positions that you're referencing here are still in place, along with the program management assistant.
I've always had an issue with not just Mr. Laxo having responsibility over these positions, but Mr. Doheny and any other area in the city where those under this infamous reorg have people who are in charge of activities that they don't have a background in. Mr. Doheny, I said this to him when he was before us, and I say it here because the DPW has similar type jurisdiction over grant positions that were previously planning. My problem with the whole reorg, because I voted against it, was that he's got enough to do. Mr. Doheny's got enough to do. I don't like the fact that these guys are also in charge of that other aspect of the business when we supposedly got rid of the planning office, but we didn't truly get rid of it because all we did was spread everybody out under different wings. I really don't feel that that really makes any sense, and that's productive. I think it's counterproductive because Mr. Laxo is a DPW commissioner. Mr. Doheny is a treasurer. They're not planning guys, in my opinion. I didn't see that in the job description when we had their appointments before us. That's another aspect of this budget proposal that I don't like. I didn't like it last year. I didn't like it 2 years ago, because I feel like it masks to the public supposed savings that aren't realized, because it's not a savings if you just let go of one person and spread everybody else out and say, oh, there's no planning department. I don't think Mr. Laxo should have jurisdiction over those employees. I think there should be a standalone department like before, with a supervisor. I don't like the fact that there are positions in his budget like that, and I don't like the fact that Mr. Doheny's got the same problem, same issue. I consider it an issue. I don't think they belong there. I don't think they should be in charge of those things. They've got enough to worry about. Quite honestly, in my opinion, I think, if anything, you should be in charge of all of it. That's your area of expertise. Call me crazy. I don't know. I never liked that reorg. I still don't. I don't think it makes any sense, because in my opinion, there are people in charge of certain positions that they're not qualified to be in charge of. They're qualified in their special areas. They're getting more and more responsibility. I don't think it's fair to them. And I'm not directing that at you. It's not your call, but it's the structure of this budget with what Councilor Hay touched upon earlier with these grants. I just don't like how it's all being spread out, and people who are in charge don't have a lot of background in those types of activities, in my opinion. I may be wrong, but I'm not convinced. Thank you.
I think, that just looking over the budget, I think that the majority of Mr. Doheny's CDBG involvement is gone. I mean, there's nothing in red parentheses in finance. I think it's all in housing or Board of Health and DPW now. But there's some grant money, but there's really nothing in red. It used to be, even in your office, there was some CDBG for your accounting purpose.
Right,
but
my assistant, prior assistant auditor used to work a day or so in planning, and there was a credit from block grant for that.
But there's no longer.
But there no longer is.
So my question then is, because I know it was there last year, and you're right, I don't see it here, but
Right.
Mr. Doheny is in charge of all finance and administration, right? He's technically, based on the reorg, in charge of your office, purchasing, assessing, IT. According to the reorg, he's the top guy.
Right.
So am I to understand, where did all those positions go that he had last year under CDBG? Where are they now? Or did we just get rid of them?
If whatever positions were, they may not have even been under his purview last year. I have last year's budget, I could look, but...
I could have swore, Dick,
we
that...
could easily check.
I could have swore, Dick, that when he was before us last year, he told us that he was in charge of certain CDBG positions based on the reorg.
Well, they may not have shown under the treasurer's budget, but,
Okay,
It was IT.
okay.
yeah.
Supposed to report to Mr. Doheny, and that's not funded through CDBG. The individual that is doing IT at one point was funded through, am I correct, Larry? One point, that individual's position was funded through CDBG when he was doing the mapping? Yes, and then when he became the IT person, he stopped being funded through CDBG, but he supposedly is supervised by Mr. Doheny, but isn't in the office.
And I see the grant position is still in the IT, so technically, Mr. Donnie does have CDBG people working under him.
Counselor Hay.
Yeah, just to get back to what Councilor Di Natale was talking about, and Lenny's answer, I just want to clarify something for myself. You said 3 in the department that came from planning, but am I not correct that there's 4? Because there's the business manager, that used to be in planning, and the planner, principal planner, planner 2 projects, and planner 3 CDBG admin. Those are 4 individuals that used to be in planning, not 3 that now are in your organization?
Yeah, the way I took the question was literally how many planners we have, which was 3. but-
Okay, I
but
just
there's
wanted
also the,
to, I think he
business
was asking
manager
how many people came from planning.
And the program management assistant, so that would be 5.
Yeah, so that's where I was at. So there are actually 5 people in your division now that used to be part of the planning department.
Right.
Not 3, okay. And to follow up on Councilor Di Natale's discussion about who supervises whom and who has the abilities with this reorg, am I correct that those individuals who now work for you and are in your budget, and individuals who work for Mr. Curry and in his budget aren't housed in that department, that they are still in their own space where there used to be when there was a planning department?
That's right.
And am I correct in stating that that is something that was written into the contract, or as an addendum to the contract, that those people can't be moved out of that space?
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
I have.
The overall reorganization, including change in office space, was part of the whole collective bargaining process that took place with the
Right, so
association.
the collecting bargaining
And
process...
ultimately, when it reached its conclusion, the determination was made that, for the time being, that there wouldn't be, people wouldn't be moving in their spaces, and a large part of that was simply because of the physical limitations of the space up on the 4th floor. We had planned to move the planning portion of that department, the people we were talking about under the DPW, upstairs.
Whose we had planned to move?
Well, during the planning process, during the reorganization meetings among the several department heads who participated in that, there was discussion about moving upstairs to the 4th floor. However, the space just simply wasn't large enough to move in the number of people that we needed, and all of the office space and equipment that we had to bring up there.
My point is, in connection with Councilor Di Natale's comment about who's supervising whom, is that we have people who are supervised by this individual, and this individual, and this individual, and yet they're all over here in this office. That doesn't work for me. I don't understand it. I think when your boss tells you, you move from this office to that office, that's where you move. I understand it was bargained. I think that's horrible bargaining, and it makes no sense to me. And the reorg, in my opinion, I voted for it, hasn't worked, and that's a perfect example of it. And we get people working for folks who don't supervise them. Not that they don't supervise them, they're not in this space. Thank you.
Councilor Bean.
Wrapping this up, but I just wanted to add my kudos as Councilman Bove does for the work that the DPW does and your administration, Lenny. The times that I've had concerns from constituents or issues brought to your attention, they've been handled efficiently in a quick manner, and I just want to commend you and your staff for the work you do and on behalf of the city, and just thank you. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hay.
Just one more thing. When you talked about, Councilor Di Natale did, about the reorg in the planning department and getting rid of one individual. That's true, but we added another position with the director or manager of housing. So We didn't cut any places, we just moved people around and changed titles. Thank you.
Counselor T-Bone, yes.
I just have first of all, I do want to say thank you. You've been so, I can't tell you, as a new counselor and being able to remedy a lot of my constituents' issues, I think, Lenny, you've been stellar at it, and so I just want to thank you and your department and all the folks under you, so thank you. But I just wanted to check in with you on, because the parks maintenance, and I understand the number of people aren't enough, but there was a huge concern that I did bring up on New Snock Road and Water Street, that park that is pretty old and it's made out of wood. I went past there again, and I noticed that there's guardrails that have not been put up yet. And I'm just wondering, I know you sent an email saying that you were going to that people were going to come, I believe, from the college and work on it, and so I'm just curious if there's any future plans for that old, playground, because it's very, very dangerous and very, very old.
I mean, there was a group, I think they were primarily from the college, that did a cleanup there, and they did some minor repairs on the play structures there. We can take another look and see if it needs any additional work, or if it's time to remove it altogether.
Yeah, my biggest concern is the liability that the city would have if a kid breaks his arm or gets injured on that facility. I won't take my kids there. That's how dangerous it is, I believe. So that would be really, I think, urgent.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Counselor Hay. Counselor Hay?
Lenny, is that a city park? Is that under the jurisdiction of the park commissioners?
Yeah, I asked the assessor's office about that, and that part is not included in the same parcel of land that the building is on. It is on parkland.
Oh, okay.
Counselor Reynolds.
Since you mentioned these specific places, getting off from the finance just a little bit, there was a gentleman here who spoke strongly about the danger at the river there, and frequently I go there and stand there and just look, and it appears to me very dangerous, and I don't know if you can think of any creative way to help. At the Firestone building, across from Shacks, that area.
Riverfront Park. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that issue is going before the Parks Board next week, so they've been looking into that, and they'll discuss it next week, and I think they're going back to the council with a recommendation.
Anybody else? Thank you. Moving on to page 40, we have the Water Enterprise Fund. No. Moving on to, where are we? Sorry, page 60. Water total revenue, $5,370,000. Total water personnel services, $1,264,353. Total subtotal expenses, $632,200. Regional water treatment expenses, $657,000. Total reimbursement to the city, $700,000. Total debt service, $1,795,621. Total capital expenses, $295,000. Total expenses, $5,344,174. Total surplus, I would imagine that's a surplus this year, $26,826. Mr. Munier?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just again, reviewing some of the highlights of the current fiscal year. We did add 2 additional employees, which has worked out tremendously for the department. They are distribution employees. Those 2 new employees have allowed us to do all of our own minor repairs, service repairs, small repairs out on the road, even medium-sized repairs. The 2 individuals that we hired have worked out tremendously. They've been very aggressive in pursuing additional water licenses. It's also allowed us to do hydrant flushing this year, which hadn't been done in several years, and previously had been contracted out to a private company for the sum of $40,000. So we've completed about 75 to 80% of all the hydrants, and we're continuing to work on those. Again, the 2 new employees have allowed us to do all of that in-house. They also, because we do have them full-time, they've been assigned to watershed work, doing trimming, doing fire roads, access roads to reservoirs, doing some dam maintenance. So again, that's worked out exceptionally well, in my opinion. We completed, probably at the end of the beginning of this fiscal year, the regional clarifier rebuild at the regional plant up in Westminster. You may recall it's a $1.1 million upgrade. Again, that has worked out wonderfully. That was completed just in time for the, as I may have mentioned in previous appearances here, for the unfortunate Johnsonian fire, which we completed those clarifier upgrades, and we were able to pump 7,000 gallons a minute to the firefighting operation. And without those clarifiers, that would have been a very touchy situation. So I appreciate the support that received in the council here. As far as capital improvements this year, the 2 major ones are the, in conjunction with the Mass Department of Transportation rebuild of the Kimball Street Bridge and the River Street Bridge. We took advantage of those contracts to replace 2 major water mains, a 12-inch on Kimball Street and an 8-inch on River Street. The new water main going over the Kimball Street Bridge will give us redundancy to the Claiborne section of Fitchburg. Some of you may remember back several years ago, we lost a major water main during budget hearings on a Saturday morning right at the 50/50 Diner at Oak Hill Road. That crossed the river, one of our major river crossings of the water mains. That had not been replaced, so this was an opportunity to replace that 12-inch water main, give us redundancy to a good section of the city, and take advantage of the administration and some supervision that Mass DOT provided. And then at the same time, we're replacing an 8-inch water main at the River Street Bridge as that gets reconstructed, and that will allow us to eliminate an old piece of water main that currently runs under the railroad tracks, and it made us very nervous if that old piece of main would break under the tracks and how we would gain access to it and cause great disruption in the tracks. So we'd be able to close 2 valves, eliminate that section, and with the new section running over the River Street Bridge, that will provide that same redundancy and supply down River Street. Those 2 projects are in the process of being completed, and the total cost was $182,000 to the Water Department. As you know, the other major undertaking was conversion to monthly billing, which, despite some protest, I think has gone very well. And then just very recently, we were informed we looked into an energy rebate grant from National Grid, one of our major pumping stations at Mare Meadow Reservoir, which pumps water from Mare Meadow Reservoir into the Meeting House Reservoir on an as-needed basis. That's one of our major electrical users. We pursued contacted National Grid, which is the supplier of our electricity at that location, and we were able to get an $8,000 grant to replace the motor and the variable frequency drive on that pump, which will be about a 1-year payback. They're going to fund about half the cost of that project, which is about $16,000, and will save us about $8,000 to $10,000 a year in electricity on that one pump. Just kind of as a point of information, I've been here before and said how the water usage, the amount of water that we bill has kind of steadily dropped. We're not unique in that situation. Most communities have seen through water conservation and businesses closing, commercial places closing, the usage of water drop. I guess I'm pleased to report that over the last year and a half to 2 years, our water usage and the amount of billed water that we supply has remained steady for this year. At the end of this fiscal year, I anticipate, because of some not excess revenue, but it's some additional revenues with the conversion to monthly billing, we should have between $800,000 and $900,000 in our retained earnings. We are working with a consultant and in-house to prioritize some capital projects that we can make use of that retained earnings, either as to fund some debt service in a loan, or to pay directly for some capital projects to do dam repair, which Mr. Laxo touched upon. We have 11 dams that are under the Water Department purview that need substantial repair and maintenance, all of them. We have been able to utilize a local engineer to help us minimize those costs additionally, and to stretch them out over a number of years, but they're not going away. We will need to spend some money on our dams. We have a 5-year capital improvement plan to replace water mains, and I think going into this fiscal year, 2013, we're finally going to see some funds and make some funds available to do a little bit more water main replacement. Just as Councilor Bean referred to the roads needing repairs, and you have to do so many miles of roads a year to keep up, we really should be doing so many miles of water main every year just to keep up. That's been kind of put on the back burner for a few years, and we do have a plan in place to start doing some major water main replacement.
All set? Sorry.
As far as the highlights for this budget, just highlight a couple of major changes. There are not a lot of them. I am asking for $10,000 for 2 part-time employees to mostly 2 people to paint hydrants for July and August. 2 people for 8 weeks to go around and paint the hydrants. As we flush the hydrants, we realize that they do need painting and maintenance. And again, as I think Councilor Di Natale mentioned, not only as a functional and keeping them well maintained, but as an aesthetic point in the city. When you go around and you see well-painted hydrants, it always catches my eye in other communities, and I want to take advantage of that this summer with 2 extra part-time people. Then I am asking for an upgrade to the office manager position, and that upgrade would be to a water operations coordinator. The person in that position has taken on a tremendous amount of responsibility in past due collections and in dispatching and coordinating repairs and shutoffs, turn-ons, working with real estate agents in real estate transactions. She has done a tremendous job for the city. This water operations coordinator was a position that was previously filled by Ms. Farrell up here, and before she became clerk, so it was a position within the department. So we're not adding anybody, but just upgrading that position. Total cost of that upgrade this year would be $1,820. And lastly, I just wanted to mention we are working with they've contacted us, a graduate student from Clark University, and we're looking at ways of investigating and evaluating alternatives used around the country to improve affordability for water and sewer bills. It may mean conservation programs, it may mean subsidies, it may mean alternative financing, but this individual saw the newspaper reports about the large increases in water and sewer bills, again, mostly on the sewer side, but she came forward, and she's a dual major in public policy and in environmental studies. Name's Ashley Howard, and we'll be working with her free of charge from now until January to do a in-depth investigation of affordability and how we could make it affordable for both low-income and people on fixed incomes, and probably have some recommendations for the mayor and for this body come in January or February of next year. Thank you.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dennis, we talked about this a little bit earlier this evening for a moment or two, and I'd like to, as a point of information to other councilors, bring this up. Yesterday, we received from the mayor a sheet of employee counts. And under the Water Division, last year, you had an employee count of 22 and a half. And on the mayor's sheet, that is the same figure. But on fiscal 13, your figure, Dennis, is 24 and a half, and the mayor's figure is 23 and a half. The mayor is not here tonight. It may be unfair to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyways. Do you know what the difference is? I mean, I know there's a difference of one there.
Yeah, I did
but
supply
do you
a-
know why there's a
I'm
disparity?
not sure exactly how the mayor came up with the 23 and a half, because I supplied it with the same information that I gave all the councilors a supplemental sheet this evening, just in case you didn't have this information. And it shows that we have not added any full-time employees. We still have 22 and a half. The 24 and a half in my sheet counts the 2 part-time summer employees that I'm asking for. So there's no additional full-time employees in the water department. It's 2 summer employees for 8 weeks. That's the difference in my sheet.
I can only guess that maybe the mayor, where you counted as 2 employees, the mayor is maybe counting 1. She's adding 2 employees for 8 weeks, maybe she's calling that 1 instead of 2?
Don't know exactly how that came about. The only other possibility, Counselor, is, under our personal services, that's, you already discussed with Mr. Laxo, we do have some employees that are covered, part of their salary is covered under the Water Enterprise Fund. The business manager and the 2 community planners, we pick up a portion of their salaries, and, and the civil engineer. So I don't know if she kind of added those all together, or that could be another possibility, but...
Maybe, Mr. President, in our list of, in our growing list of things, we could add this particular note here to see if the mayor could explain this.
I think it's, the explanation, as he said, is here on his, it says summer help 2 people, which brings him up to 24.5. On the mayor's, she put add 2 people for 8 weeks, and I think she counted that as 1 equivalent. So we can check, make a note
I
out
think
there.
that we should check it with her.
To find out further clarification.
Yep. Thank you, Dennis.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. Dennis, you said between $800,000 and $900,000 of retained earnings for this fiscal year, which makes sense to me looking at the status C. We've collected $5.4 million of revenue through May, and we've spent about $4.7 so far on the expense side. So the trends look like it's going to hit $800,000 or $900,000. In addition to that $800,000 and $900,000, what do you have currently in retained earnings, not including that $800,000 to $900,000 you'll get this year?
It's not, we currently had, going into this fiscal year, we had right around $500,000. So I'm thinking that we will gain about $300,000 to $400,000 in addition to that 500, make a total of 800. Might be
Okay.
being conservative.
Okay, so you have 500 now, and you're looking to add 300 to 400 on top of that?
That's correct.
Okay, so you're estimating between 800,000 and 900,000 total retained, not just 1 year, okay. I believe we had discussions yesterday with the wastewater department, and I know you've given this before, but it would be good to have an update periodically, again, on a schedule of the water department. You probably gave us this a year or 2 ago, and going out several years, but as a refresher, the projected amount of retained earnings, given the current rate structure that you plan to realize in the department beyond FY13.
Sure.
You'll be at about $900,000 at the end of this fiscal year, and you obviously have capital needs that, should be first and foremost funded through that money, but that would just be beneficial to get an update on that.
Sure.
I'm looking at the revenues that have been collected, and it looks like the department's doing adequate job at meeting its revenue projection for the year. Actually, it's already been surpassed, so that's encouraging to see. One question I have is my understanding that, given the fact that the bills that go out to customers every month, the sewer and the water is on the same bill,
That's correct.
the water department reads the meters for the water side, but the sewer section of that, it's different. It's, is it different in how the bills for the sewer department are determined versus the water?
No, for the vast majority of the citizens in Fitchburg that have water and sewer at their residence, the meter, it's the same meter. The water meter reads the water going into the residence, or the commercial building, or the business. And then the sewer bill is based on that usage. Water goes in, the water goes out. It's exactly the same number. The only thing that's applied differently is the rate. Obviously, the water rate is $3.16, and the sewer rate is $7.30. And those two items are separated on each bill, and but it's exactly the same. The only thing that comes out differently is recently we've had a number, or not a number, but a handful of people that have sewer-only accounts. And those bills, up until recently, or they still are, had been based on a usage of 4 people using a standard amount of water, which is a textbook amount of water. As the sewer rates have gone up, more people are saying, well, wait a minute, I'm paying a lot more than my wife and I use at this building. So they would like to be metered. So what we've done is allowed people to install meters on their wells and read those meters, and then send them a sewer-only bill based on their actual usage versus an estimated four-person use.
Forgive me, I meant to say those without a water account,
Right.
not together. I'm sorry about that, just
Yep.
for those who have a
Well,
well.
but then again, we understood, as said, as the rates have gone up, people are looking at that more closely, and it's becoming, kind of jumped out at them that, well, how am I being billed for sewer-only accounts? We said, well, that's been in the code and in the rules and regs, that you're based on a usage of 4 people in a household, and so it was a standard rate, because we did not have a meter in those houses, they only had a well. And that's been for a long time, a number of years. And we understood the complaint, and now we're allowing people to buy a water meter, have it installed, we inspect it, and we read that meter just as we read everybody else's meter, but they get a sewer-only bill based on actual usage.
That meter being read, is that read by your department?
Yes.
And then is that communicated to the sewer department?
It has been up until now. As of July 1st, we're going to do it all, keep it all in the water department, because it's easier. We do all the other billing. And again, that's part of the additional responsibilities I feel the office manager has taken on.
That's where I was going with this, is that since you're both on the same bill, has there been any discussion or movement, and I think you just answered it, and consolidating the office work of the sewer and the water department with regard to billing, so there's not extra red tape of you guys going back and forth with each other, instead of just having it all consolidated in one office?
That's what we're doing.
So that's good to know. That'll improve efficiency, no question. Dennis, what other major capital projects does the water department see on the horizon? And by major, I mean like over $1 million. I mean, anything pressing or on the horizon?
Well, nothing on the emergency side, again, except for we've seen this for a number of years now, the amount of work that's going to be needed on the 11 dams that we own. Again, we've stretched that work out. As Lenny mentioned, we've applied to Office of Dam Safety to modify some of the ratings of the dams that we have, so they don't need as much work and they're not as expensive. But having done all that, we're still going to need significant amount of work on Overlook Dam, Ashby Compensating Dam, let's see, almost every dam we have has maintenance that's due. Some of them are in poor condition by state standards. So that's one area that we're definitely going to need to spend capital money. And as I said in my opening, we do have a 5-year master plan of roads that need to be replaced. We've prioritized that plan, and so we've broken them up into chunks of water main replacement that come up to between $500,000 and $1 million each. And we're doing right now is trying to figure out the best way to do that, whether to borrow money for short-term, 10 years, 20 years, and use the retained earnings to pay the debt service, or to do some projects and pay directly out of the retained earnings, all the while maintaining at least, I wanted to maintain at least $500,000 in retained earnings, at least.
And my last question is, how many miles of piping do you estimate need to be replaced or on the short list to be replaced? I mean, how many miles of piping does the city have?
We have approximately 190 miles of water main and water services in the...
And of that?
And of that, I mean, we probably should be replacing 10 to 15% of it is probably in critical need, or, you know, is of an age that it should be replaced, or has been, what happens to water pipes, and you've seen the demonstration before, the diameter closes in as it tuberculates and builds up mineral deposits. Those should be cleaned in line. Sometimes you don't have to replace the pipe, but you have to go in and scrape them down to the sidewalls and then line them with a cement-type liner. And so that's another another project that we can undertake. So, you know, I'm saying 10 to 15% of that 190 miles should be.
That's about 25, 30 miles. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Caddy.
Dennis, how many total acres of land does the water department own?
Watershed land, we own about 3,800 acres on northern watershed and the southern watershed.
And last year, the year before, you were exploring wind power. Have you gone any further with that?
We have not. We have not pursued that any further. One of the location that was identified as the primary point of wind power was up by Scott Reservoir on Ashby West Road, and we did pursue with Unitil what that would mean, and the power lines on Ashby West are not adequate to handle that load or to accept the direct input from a turbine. The lines would have to be run all the way down to Ringe Road, so that's a hurdle that we would have to overcome, but we haven't pursued it beyond that.
You mean the lines so that you can feed it back to the grid?
That's correct.
How about solar? Would that be the same?
Solar, my understanding, and again, I'm not an expert at it, but it does need a large amount of acreage that really to make it worthwhile for the amount of power that we would use. So again, we haven't looked into solar.
You probably don't know, but we had a gentleman in here last night, I think it was, that wants to put up solar fields on Alpine Road. Just seems to me that your department is probably the biggest landowner in Fitchburg, and sometimes people are offended by windmills or solar fields, but I think we have the luxury of owning the property with no one around. I think that maybe it's something for the new Energy Commission.
We did receive an inquiry maybe a year and a half ago of an individual that wanted to put up solar panels but wanted 10 clear acres. And they were using it on a landfill. So they had a capped landfill that had, no trees on it, and they were putting solar panels on a capped landfill. Even though we own 3,800 acres, we don't have 10 acres that are cleared, and I don't think, anybody would be in favor of clear-cutting 10 acres of watershed land to put solar panels up, but...
Maybe it's something the new Energy Commission could
look into.
Could look into for you?
Cooperate and look at it.
Thank you.
Councilor Boisvert.
Thank you. Dennis, recently we changed our method of billing. Could you tell us how that has affected your collections and how much is owed in delinquent accounts versus 6 months ago?
As you all know, maybe, a year and a half, 2 years ago now, we started being a lot more aggressive about collecting delinquent accounts. When we started that process, we took a criteria of 60 days late and owing more than $500 as a kind of a basis point to judge how we were doing. At that time, using that criteria, the city was owed $1.2 million. Through efforts of collections and delinquent notices, shut-offs, we got that down to around $500,000. I felt strongly, Deputy Commissioner Jordan, I think, also felt strongly that going with the increase in sewer rates, going to a monthly billing would help people manage those bills, and the goal is to help people pay those bills. We put that in place in January. I looked at it today, that delinquent amount is still at about $500,000, but in the transition to monthly billing, it's taken a lot of our time and taking a lot of the clerical time, so we haven't been as aggressive over the last 2 or 3 months as we transition to monthly billing in past due collections. And every time we backed off before, that $500,000 would quickly escalate back up to 600, 700, approaching $1 million. We'd have a big push, get it back down to 500,000. What I've seen in a limited amount of time with the monthly billing is that 500,000 is staying even. So I think it is having the desired effect. It's helping people pay those bills. I'm not saying we're not going to go after the delinquent accounts. We will be still pursuing delinquent accounts, sending past due and shut-off notices to try to get that down even lower. But I think it is having the desired effect. And quite frankly, I think the jury is still out. It hasn't been long enough, a year from now or in January, February, when we get a little more data, I think we'll have a better idea. But I think I get a lot of feedback. I know I've gotten some kind of very pointed emails and some calls about people not liking monthly billing, but I have to say the favorable responses from our customers about monthly billing far outweighs the negative comments that we receive in the department. We receive dozens of phone calls a day about billing or about other subjects, and people bring up the fact how much they like the monthly billing without, even if they call about a different subject. We had one this afternoon. A lady called about a different subject, but then by the way, I want to thank you for monthly billing. I really am appreciating that. So again, I know you've received calls, and so have we, people that are not happy with it, but there are many, many more calls that are people that are pleased with it.
Well, Dennis, I'd like to applaud you for your collection practices, and I hope they continue to improve the debt ratio to the amount owed. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Dennis, how many people do you have on the street? I know you have your plant, I know you gave us a number, but how many people are actually on the street doing work?
On the distribution crew, we have currently 4 people.
Is that down from where you've been in the past?
No, it's actually up with the 2 new people. Going back a long time, they had many, many more people, but we're talking 10, 15 years ago, maybe more, where they had that many more employees. 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, they were down to sometimes two people on the street, and most of the work being contracted out.
And when did you stop replacing water pipes in the street? At what point did that project stop? I mean, that's been something that has been a bragging point by the Water Division every year that they come in here, that they've replaced a mile, they've replaced 2 miles, they've relined. At what point did that stop?
As you've pointed out so many times in these hearings, Counselor, the use of retained earnings, when they had large retained earnings, was used to do water main projects. That retained earnings had gotten down to below $500,000, so that's when it stopped. So probably 4 to 5 years ago.
I still don't like you having my money, okay? 800,000, 900,000, I still don't like it being in your pocket. I'd rather be in my pocket. But if we're not getting what we need for it, then again, put it back in my pocket. If you're going to reline this, it's been a yearly thing that you've always relined or replaced pipes, and then this year we come in and we say that we haven't done that project.
Well, again, as I mentioned before, our 2 capital projects were taking advantage of the 2 bridge rebuilds, which was a $200,000 project to get those 2 pieces of water main replaced.
Okay, but it's always been, there's always been how much pipe has been replaced every year, so it's disappointing that nothing's getting done. It will back up on you fast. Counselor Clark.
Mr. President. Dennis, you mentioned the $500,000 that's still out there on unpaid bills. I think you've been before us before and said that there was a number, that $500,000, there's a number we're never going to be able to recoup. Can you refresh me what that number is? Is it 150 that we're never going to be able to recoup?
I don't know if I ever put a number on it.
I don't think,
Any utility, whether it's water or gas or electric, always has on the books past due balances. I think every utility works hard, and again, when former Councilor Connery was here, he would tell us about Unitil and the efforts to collect past due bills. Everybody has a certain percentage. We've got this down to about 5%, and I'd like to get it lower, but I think 5% is not great, but it's certainly better than the 10% it was 2 years ago.
Thank you. Wastewater, page 55. Wastewater Enterprise Fund, total revenue $12,305,000. Total personnel services, $2,332,818. Total expenses, $4,218,000. Total reimbursement to the city, $840,000. Total debt service, $2,791,531. Total capital expenses, $262,000. Total expenses, $10,444,349. Total surplus, $1,860,651.
Good evening, councilors. I would, as did Commissioner Lasko and Deputy Commissioner Murney, I'd just like to recap a little bit of last year. As you know, we have been busy over in the wastewater department. Excuse me. Most notably, we've spent a great amount of time with the negotiation of the consent decree, which, as you know, we finally got that settled. And we have, although we are still negotiating, we were moving forward with a lot of different projects at the plant and out in the street to work towards complying with that. Excuse me, I have a little bug here. In the past year, personnel-wise, we have added 2 people, actually 3 people. One was a collection system supervisor, one was a GIS engineer, and the third, which just started last week, was a new plant superintendent. The collection crew manager and the GIS, those positions were in direct response to work that we had to do out in the collection system. In the 6 months that they've been on board with us, I think they've really made some good progress. They've identified several areas throughout the city that were problematic, causing a lot of overflows, backups, and instead of going out and digging to replace the pipe, they were able to make corrections with the equipment that we had in-house. Those jobs saved us in excess of $100,000 just in the last few months. They've also been very aggressive in going out and starting to inspect and collect video of all the sewer line in the city, just to help us categorize the condition of the pipe, which is one of the mandates that we have. And the importance there is once we fully understand the condition of the pipes, we can have a more targeted approach as to what pipes we're going to repair and what type of repair is going to be done. So they've really have been a benefit to the city in understanding what our system is. Before we understand it, it's hard to take corrective action until you can identify what the problem is out there. The new plant superintendent, that's a position that's been vacant now for a couple years due to a death of the past superintendent. We've had extreme difficulty trying to fill this due to rates that we were offering, that the city was offering, the annual salary. And one of my upgrades is I bumped that position up just a little bit so we could attract qualified people. We were able to find a gentleman with many years' experience running plants. I think he's going to work out very well. And I also think it's important that we got someone in at this point. Our chief engineer is scheduled to retire in the next year or two. And I hope, as you can all appreciate, with all the work going on down there, that we really need to have a smooth transition when that one person who fully understands the plant, when he retires, we have to have someone in charge who can fall into a seamless transition. And that gentleman just came on board with us last week. Some accomplishments for 2012. As I said, we did hire some new individuals. Another thing we do personnel-wise is we did have a couple outstanding worker comp claims against us. We were able to settle those, and I do hope to fill those positions which were being held up. I would like to fill those in fiscal 2013. They were budgeted but left unfilled due to the outstanding claims. I would also like to fill other vacancies, and I'll get to that shortly. As you are aware, we did finalize the consent decree. The mayor is expected to sign that tomorrow. She was out of the city today, but that will be signed and sent back to our Department of Justice tomorrow. We have made several accomplishments, although it wasn't signed, the decree. We did make a lot of accomplishments down, both at the plant and out in the system. As I said, we bought some tracking software that will allow us to collect data and also document the condition of the sewer system, which will give us a lot of very valuable information towards directing our repairs. We've also installed meters at all the CSO outfalls so we can more accurately quantify the amount of CSO. That will help us prove to EPA that we are reducing our volumes with the separation projects. Up until this point, we're only tracking 10 out of the 33 outfalls. The other 23, we just had little blocks on the weir walls that basically said it overflowed, but we had no idea of the volume, the duration, how often they activated. With the new equipment we have out there now, we will have much more detailed data. We have, through the negotiations, we have developed essentially a 20-year capital improvement plan, which is going to address all the issues both in the plant and out in the system. And it's with this plan, we hope to, not hope, we will come into compliance, full compliance with our NIPD's permit. As you know, this year we did sign contracts and are beginning construction on 2 new separation projects. One is over in the Milk Street area, in the adjacent streets. The other is Albee Street and the streets adjacent to there. And we are doing some very small job over on Daniel Street in Cleghorn. We're also proceeding this year. Construction has begun. The contractor did mobilize to do upgrades down at the treatment plant to bring us closer to compliance with our phosphorus levels. And that will also help us to treat the water better so that in the event we do have to bypass, we'll have a much cleaner effluent, in hopes that if it's cleaner coming out of primary treatment, that even if we bypass, we still won't violate the plant permit. One thing we did do in terms of operation is we went from a series mode of operation to a parallel treatment system, and what that has done, it's allowed us to essentially double the wet weather flow through the plant. That has significantly reduced the violations that we report on a monthly basis, and I believe I know EPA has taken notice of that, and I do believe that that was part of why they were willing to work with us to some extent. They are seeing progress. They do understand that we are taking this serious, and we're doing everything we can to improve our compliance as quickly as possible. Going forward for next year, we will be beginning design on a third phase of separation work, which will include the John Fitch Highway area, primarily Bartell Street, and a lot of the adjacent roads out there. That is just began design work in the last couple weeks, and that is expected to go out to bid early next year, in the spring of next year. We also hope to move forward with the final phase of plant upgrades down at the treatment plant. Essentially, that is going to rebuild the secondary system. It's also going to put other measures to improve the treatment down there. And the hope, although I can't guarantee anything right now, but the hope is once that project is done, we will be able to meet the, if not the concentration, the mass-based permit for phosphorus. If the hope would be that if we can demonstrate that we're meeting a mass-based limit, that hopefully we won't have to proceed with the final stage of phosphorus, which, as I've been saying, is a $20 million upgrade. That was part of the savings that we could realize if everything works out as anticipated. And we will, I do hope to get the design on that going next year. We're also investigating options for the West Treatment Facility. As you know, it no longer operates as a treatment facility. One thing we are looking at as an alternative for disposing of our sludge at the landfill would be to put an anaerobic digestion plant in. What that would do is that would essentially digest the sludge. It would reduce the volume. But a byproduct of that is methane gas, and so we could install generators or turbines rather to generate electricity. We are looking into a grant. There is grant money out there to do feasibility studies, and I am working with one of our on-call engineers to move that process along. We're also while I mentioned grants, we're also looking at a grant to take a look at the East plant prior to doing the final upgrade at the treatment plant. Approximately 60% of the energy, electric energy, is used through the aeration process. That's going to be one thing that we're going to be looking to upgrade, and there is grant money out there to take a look at that whole system to see what are options to maximize the efficiency of that portion of the project. And finally, I think something that we've talked about, I spent several months looking at the finances of incineration down at the East plant, and we've had an outside consultant, Ty and Bond, assist us in looking at potential business in the coming years, and also the cost to keep that running. We've also had industry leaders in multiple hot furnaces come in, do a complete evaluation with the intent to get a long-term cost if we intended to keep this running for the next 20 years. We looked at our cost of burning now, what we take in the revenue, the net cost of the city, and long story short is it's costing us somewhere in the vicinity of $500,000 to keep that in operation. That does not include the cost of our debt service related to the sludge handling process. And it was voted by the commission that as of September 30th of this year, we'll no longer be incinerating The goal, at least for the short term, by short term, I'm talking 10 to 15 years, would be to landfill. We're currently working out a new agreement to replace the one that we had in play with the West Plant sludge. We are looking to renegotiate that such that we would have no disposal cost to get rid of the sludge. The net result is we're looking at a increased revenue of approximately $500,000 a year by stopping the incineration process. The budget you have before you tonight assumes that we're going to be burning all year. When the budget was being put together, I wanted to be very, very cautious not to assume everything was going to go perfect. If there's any glitches, if we have to continue burning longer than we anticipated, I did budget for the entire year, but the intention is that we will discontinue burning as of October 1st, and the $500,000 that we expect to save, obviously that's for a whole year. It will be a little bit less, but I would expect that we should see an additional $350,000 roughly for the next fiscal year, and then in subsequent years that should go back up closer to $500,000. Personnel-wise, there were 3 positions that I looked to upgrade for fiscal 13. The first is the, as I said, was the plant superintendent. Due to the difficulty we had because of the low salaries, that was bumped up by, I believe that was close to $3,000. However, the individual that we did hire, we brought him on for a couple $1,000s less than that. So the budgeted amount for the plant superintendent on my budget, you'll notice, is actually that was adjusted. I apologize. That was adjusted to $70,304. It was previously bumped up closer to $73,000, but we were able to hire someone at the $70,000 rate. And so that was one increase over what was budgeted last year. The second position was the maintenance engineer down at the plant. He has been with us for a year and a half, and in that year and a half, he has made tremendous progress in getting maintenance programs up and running. He has changed the morale down at the plant. It's night and day down there. He's a gentleman who came to us from the paper mills. He has a very, very thorough understanding of the equipment at the plant. He's instituting a very aggressive preventive maintenance program, which is something we have not had. And I just felt that he really has stepped up to the plate and is really doing a lot of good. Additionally, just on an hourly rate, he had subordinates who were making more than he was. I just didn't feel that was right. I feel the individual is well worth every penny we pay him. He is saving us money in the long run. He's come up with new and creative ways to retrofit the aeration basins. That it's ended up saving us money. We could do it with in-house people versus contracting out. And I just felt very strongly that he was well worth the extra $1,000 that we were bumping him up. And the last one was the chief engineer. Again, just to that was bumped up by $1,200, and that was just to kind of keep the positions in line with the other subordinates at the plant. So it was just, all told, it was a $4,000 increase for all 3 positions totaled, not each, but total. And I believe those are some of the highlights.
Okay. Councilor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Joe, just trying to get some clarification for myself. I had asked the mayor to supply us with a sheet giving the number of employees within the city and within the departments. The mayor is showing that you had 37 in 2012 and you'll have 37 in 2013, that there aren't any new employees, and yet you're telling us there are 3 new employees, so
Okay, there were 37 positions budgeted in fiscal 2012, and I have 37 budgeted for fiscal 2013. The actual number of employees, Counselor, changed almost by the month. In the collection systems, we had a lot of movement there. There's been a lot of retirements. So literally, on any given month, that number is going to be fluctuating. Generally speaking, I had 32 full-time people. That was my peak actively employed, but I had 37 budgeted positions. And my goal is to get those last 5 filled for fiscal 2013. I
Okay.
apologize for the confusion
No,
there.
that's not your fault. I'm asking for numbers and I'm getting the different sets. But in relationship to that, in these things, I have a couple questions. On page 57, wastewater operator, last year was $252,788. This year, we're going to $333,678.
Again, that was due to vacant positions. I had 3 unfilled positions.
How many positions how many wastewater operators do we have? How many positions do we have?
Positions, there are 13 in operations.
So if all 13 of those positions are filled, we will spend $333,667?
If that's what I budgeted for 13, that is correct.
Okay, and how many
Let me just get on the same page for the council.
Yep, 57, the fifth one up from the bottom.
Okay, scenic, okay, when you said operators, there are 8 operators and 5 senior operators. That's where the 13 operators came from.
Okay, so the seniors is the one up above it.
Correct.
Which is
Correct.
5, so that's 5 positions, they get $279,514, and then
Right.
8 positions,
For the 333.
and are all 8 of those positions filled?
No, they are not. Currently, I have 3 positions vacant. Yes, 3 positions are currently vacant.
Okay. If you slide up a little higher, we have storekeeper.
That was a position that the person who was in that position was only on the books for a short period last year. Storekeeper,
There was nothing in the budget last year.
he was on workers' comp last year, and that was one of the workers' comp claims that we settled, and so I didn't want to fill that until I
Okay.
was sure that
Yep.
was settled.
So that was a workers' comp, and now it's on budget, so that's a 41,496.
Correct. In the year previous, just for your benefit, the 18,000.
I'm guessing that's when the person went out.
That was you're right, that was only partial year.
Okay, sorry about this, I'm just trying to follow my... Business manager, 5%.
I apologize, when I signed this, that was an oversight on my part, that's 15%.
That's 15%. What does that 15% mean?
The $12,940 is 15% of that person's annual salary, and going back to when Commissioner Laxo was up here, in his budget, he had, I forget what it was, 70-some-odd thousand, that was his 100%.
Is this a business manager that's in Lenny's budget also?
Correct, one and the same, and I'm showing this because I am paying 15% of that out of my budget.
So you're paying 12,000, I'm sorry,
$12,940 out of
$940.
his total salary, whatever that was.
so I want to get this straight. In page 38, when I asked Mr. Laxo, that's a business manager, which is showing only 10% out of the general fund. and the total is 88,036.
Okay, and
You with me?
I pray that if you take 15% of that number, it's going to equal 12,940.
Okay, so that 12,940 isn't in addition to the 88,036?
That's correct.
Is that correct, Lenny?
Correct.
Okay.
I shouldn't be, I'm not sure what, that is what he makes, it's the 88. Yes. Right, so the
Okay.
12 is part of that. And
Okay.
council, the same for the one below that.
That was going to be my next question, the
That
community.
should have been 15%, not 5%.
Oh, that should have been 15 also.
Yes, and I apologize.
That's
for
okay.
that
No, no.
Oversight.
But I'm getting to the same point, is that that's not additional money for those individuals. So
That is,
so those two positions are actually getting a percentage of their money from the general fund, a percentage of their money from the wastewater, and a percentage of their money from CDBG.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Lenny, thank you. And I think I had one other here. The superintendent you talked about, that is the Superintendent East plant?
yes.
Okay, I'm all set, thank you. Councilor Bean.
Commissioner, when I went out to visit you at the West Plant, my concern was the West Plant itself and what we're doing with it, and currently, I think we spend about $200,000 a year just to keep it operational.
Yeah, the $200,000 counselor is to, essentially is to operate the pumps.
Right,
To,
right.
Its function as a pump station, that's correct.
So I'm encouraged to hear that you're looking at other options or opportunities for that West Plant, because there must be something that it can be used for, and hopefully, you know,
We are looking, I know that's been it's a unique plant.
right, with the carbon filtered and all that, but, maybe maybe do an RFP out there, just see what companies have some ideas or some, I just think it's too valuable of an asset there, and too large of an asset just to let sit idle if we could. So I appreciate the fact that you're looking at moving forward. When you mentioned your budget, when you looked at your budget on the operating cost, both the electricity and natural gas cost, it's a total of $2.6 million, 1.3 for your electricity, 1.3 for your natural gas. A lot of that, you said, goes to the aeration, and I know there are techniques, and we talked about this in the past, of these turbo blowers now you can replace that can help reduce your energy costs and your overall operational costs. I'm hoping that we're heading towards that direction to reduce those costs. That'll hopefully maintain rates. And then anything else we can do to reduce the energy costs, that again will help stabilize rates as we go forward. I know that, you've talked about, or at least the water department, Mr. Munir talked about the variable speed pumps he changed up in Westminster, which saved them several $1,000s per month. I know we have large pumps at the wastewater plant. I'm hoping that we're looking at changing those out as we can.
Yes, we are, and just part of the reason that we're not moving a little bit faster on there is when we do that secondary upgrade I mentioned, we're going to have to change all the pumps out to different size pumps, and as a result, the variable frequency drives, the VFDs, are also going to have to get changed. So I didn't see the benefit of changing them all out now and then tearing them all out in 2 years.
Right. I think the variable speed pumps and the blowers would be an important investment for the city to reduce the cost and to increase the efficiency.
Absolutely, we will be looking at that.
Good. And the other thing, I just had when I was looking at your chemical costs and that, they seem to fluctuate quite a bit, and we have a new chemical, I see we're adding, that magnesium hydroxide. Is there a change in the process we're making down there, or?
Yes.
And why are we making that process? Is it part of
It's part of this next upgrade that we're doing, the CEPT. It's an acronym for Chemically Enhanced Primary Treatment. And in order to get part of the negotiation with EPA was, actually this was with EPA concern, our permit had a limit of 0.2, which by law, we have to meet that right away. If it's in the permit. We appealed it, we went back, and the arrangement we worked out was we'll meet a 0.5 limit if they agree to put off the final 0.2 until 10 years down the road. And that was 2019. Part of the negotiation, we got that pushed back even further. and our hopes is that we won't have to put in a new process to get there. But in order to get to the 0.5, we do need to do what's called a multi-point dosing. So we're going to add chemicals to various places through the plant, and that's all part of the CEPT upgrade. And we're also going to be dosing chemicals to the influent. So we're going to have 3 separate areas that we're going to be dosing chemicals to. And that's the reason the polymer, if you notice, has gone up, because it's just going to be multi-point, as did, we've changed some of the chemicals based on the new process.
And then the last thing you mentioned was the methane gas recapture to do cogeneration. In full disclosure, part of my job, I visit plants across the country, and I was just down in Alexandria, which has one of the more modern plants I've seen, and they've done that a number of years ago, and they actually sell some of that methane gas off-site too. They use it in the facility for cogeneration, but also sell it. But I think it's a way of the future, and a number of other plants across the country now looking at that
anaerobic digestion.
Digesters, right, and then they capture the methane gas from that.
Right, and it reduces the volume. And just to expand a little bit on that, we can process not only our sludge, but we're also looking at taking in what's called pre-consumer food waste, basically oil and grease, before it goes through the consumer stage. So it's going to be waste from, say, Ken's salad dressing, someplace like that. That's would be mixed with the sludge, and it's just there's a lot of volatility to that, and there's a lot of other good byproducts.
Similar to years ago, we used to, I don't know if we do it anymore, but would very fine. Is that similar?
Yeah, very fine is a possibility.
Right, but years ago we used to have a contract with them and bring stuff.
Right, and we just took it in and treated it, but that.
My point is, I think there are a lot of best practices out there. I think we're heading towards that, and I just want to, hopefully, keep the eye on the ball, because $2.6 million is a lot of money to spend on electricity and gas, and anytime we can reduce that can help stabilize rates, and hopefully we can keep our rates stabilized.
Okay, and again, with the, by stopping...
Incinerator goes down, right.
Incinerator goes down, the gas cost should drop to about $400,000.
Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. I don't really have a solution for this, but I just, I'm aware that there are positions budgeted for last year, or this fiscal year, and the next fiscal year that we do not yet have certainty on whether they're going to be filled or not. This fiscal year, we had positions that were still open, and next year's budget, we're projecting that we'll fill those positions. So the wastewater budget has positions in there that are, again, funded for, that we may or may not fill. And that contributes greatly to the amount of retained earnings that the department has at the end of the year, because if it's not used, the revenues certainly aren't going to go down as a result of that. And this is no fault of the deputy commissioners. It's just, I don't have a solution for this, but I'm not crazy about that way of budgeting. We had several positions this year that we haven't filled. We have several positions again for next year, the same several positions again for next year that we may or may not fill. If we don't fill them, the department gets even more money in surplus. So I guess I have a problem with how we're budgeting. I don't know the solution, because I know it's an enterprise fund, and, I'd say put it in a reserve account, but it's still going to stay with the department. So if they use it, they don't use it, it's still going to be a surplus. But I don't know if anybody else agrees with this, but I have a problem with the fact that we had all those positions budgeted for, they weren't filled, so the department technically reaps the benefits of not using those positions with retained earnings, and they could potentially do it again this year. I don't know if the public would like hearing that we're still budgeting for these positions, we don't know if we're even going to fill them, so we may reap the reward again of not filling them, and by reward I mean another surplus. I don't know how to fix that or change that, but I'm not crazy about that practice. That's more for the mayor than for you, Mr. Commissioner. I don't know if she buys into that, but can you elaborate on that? I don't...
Yes. As I said, one of the positions, the storekeeper, was not filled because we were involved in a workers' comp settlement, and until that's settled, I potentially could be liable. And I'm not sure if Dick can help elaborate, but until he was officially off the books, I did not want to fill that position.
I understand that.
Okay? The plant superintendent, we've been trying. We made 3 job offers prior to this one. Every single one said, thanks, but no thanks. So it's not for lack of trying.
Do you understand what I'm asking, though, about
yes, my
the fact
intention
that-
is to fill those positions this year with the new processes coming online. I'm trying to get my staffing levels back up to where they were. There's a lot of things that aren't getting done. Preventive maintenance procedures on the operations side of it. And the goal, in fact, I want to get approval from the mayor, and I'm going to get these filled as soon as possible after the fiscal year begins.
Well, like the president mentioned earlier about retained earnings, I consider them to be essential in operating a business because you need reserves in case something happens. But I don't know if that's I guess the solution I'd be looking at, the avenue I'd be looking at is a way to supplement your budget when we know a position will be available. Like, you get the green light that you can go for it. Until it gets filled, you don't get the money for it. Or you don't appropriate the revenues to cover that position, instead of just budgeting it outright at the beginning of the year and maybe not filling it for 6 or 7 months. So you reap a surplus savings of not getting that position filled in 7 months. Even though that's not your goal, you want to fill it as soon as possible. I don't feel comfortable with budgeting it now and taking a chance that we may not fill it for several months, as opposed to getting to the point where we actually we have a candidate, you get approval from the mayor that you can go for it, and then there is some kind of an amendment to your budget where you get that funding at that point, and not just have it sit there and not be used potentially for the entire year. I don't know if there's a way to do that.
My only comment would be that if it is held in retained earnings, I know Councilor Joseph doesn't like that, but if you recall, when we went back and looked at different scenarios, we could have done one larger increase now, and we would fully expect we're going to build up some retained earnings, but at the end of 5 years, we're going to be using all that as the loans start to kick in. The option was to do annual increases, so it would have been smaller, but we would have to raise faster down the end. It's kind of like a retirement. You put some aside now, and in the long run, you end up having to raise the rates at a lower level. That's the intent. My goal here is that, we said the $7.30 rate is a 5-year rate. I'm really hoping to extend that out beyond that 5-year period. If we can, the superintendent, counselor, it was just, there's not a lot of people out there who can fill that position.
I understand that, Mr. Jordan. I'm not saying that you're sitting on it so you can get a surplus. I'm saying I wish there was a mechanism in place where you have the approval to go for the position, and at the time of potential hire, funds would be released to your budget that weren't there, so it can cover just that portion instead of potentially not having it covered at all, or covered fully but not being used. My similar concern is with the incinerator operations. You stated that the budget is conservative in that it projects that we'll be using the incinerator for the full year, even though we're anticipating that it'll be shut down by October 1st. So you said instead of $500,000, it'd be $350,000, because we're still going to operate it for July, August, September, 3 months, so a quarter of the fiscal year. I understand that, but the budget is for the full year. So my other concern is, knowing that it most likely will shut down October 1st, there is still a tremendous amount of expenses for the other 9 months that we most likely are not going to use. So your retained earnings is even going to go up higher. And again, I'm not against the retained earnings going up, but if we know we're not going to use the incinerator for 3/4 of the year, but it's budgeted that way, that's a significant amount of expense money that you're not going to use, that you should have a tremendous amount of surplus next year. I'm not crazy about that budget practice. I feel your budget should only reflect the 3 months of operation, and if it requires more, there should be some kind of a supplement process for that. But that bothers me that we have something budgeted for 12 months that we know we're probably going to use for 3. You're going to reap a huge savings, a big surplus out of that this year, but we know now we're not going to need all that money, so
I guess at the end of the year, my revenues are going to be X. And
I know, but the revenues are to cover the operations and some, and the operations that it's covering, we're not going to use some of those operations, so
I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay. My only other comment is to Councilor Hayes' questions earlier about the submission the mayor gave us for full-time employees across the city. I would like to ask that it be communicated to Mayor Wong that that submission be amended to read a fiscal 12 and fiscal 13 budgeted full-time equivalent employees for each department, and what the actual was for FY12. Because as we see in this department, we budgeted 37, so the mayor says FY12 is 37, FY13 is 37, so there's no increase. But in reality, Mr. Jordan only had 32. So I think that should just be further clarified, that to add a column for actual FTEs for the year in addition to what was budgeted for. So that would add some, perhaps some clarity to some of the questions that are being asked tonight. Thank you.
Councilor Reynolds.
First of all, Mr. Jordan, Commissioner Jordan, I appreciate you very much. I think you've been under tremendous pressure. I've seen you over the last 2 years, and thank you so much for what you've done for the city. In previous conversation with you, we talked about the incinerator and the fragile condition of it, and evidently now you've come to the conclusion that you want to shut it down rather than do any repairs. In former years, that incinerator was the source of a lot of income for the city, but that's been dwindling, has it?
Yes.
But it's been handling the city's sludge.
Yes, and if we were to burn only the city sludge, we will only be required to burn 3 or 4 days a week. And if you would like it to an oven at home, is when you turn it on, you got to wait 20, 30 minutes for it to heat up, and then when you're done using it, it cools back down. And what they found is, although they were only burning for 3 or 4 days, they almost had to keep the gas on for 7 days.
And have people stopped bringing sludge to the city to burn?
Part of it is, yes, the amount of liquid sludge that comes to us has been dwindling due to trucking costs and the price of fuel. A lot of people are dewatering, and we don't have the capability to accept that. The other significant change has been that in order to get more flow through the plant, we've had to change the way we operate, and as a result, we have to waste more of our own sludge. And so there's just less room for outside vendors to come in. And so that's one reason why we have a peak, where in the old days, if it was a decision between wasting out of our tanks or taking a customer in, we'd take the customer in and we just let the solids go out. We can no longer do that practice. We really have to operate the plant to its best capability.
So when it goes down, how will our sludge get burned?
We're not going to burn, we're going to go to the landfill.
We're going to do the landfill?
Yeah, we're still going to dewater our own sludge, and then that's going to get trucked to the landfill.
And that's financially beneficial to us?
Yes, as I said, the landfill wants to increase the amount of septage that comes to the city, or leachate, I'm sorry, not septage, leachate, and so we are working an arrangement out where we'll take up to so many gallons. In exchange, they will take up to so many tons.
Does that tie us in that ad infinitum after this, we have to do it that way, or is this only a temporary fix that perhaps we can be free of the landfill in the future?
Right. What I'd like to, we'll never be free. Even burning, we still have to bring ash up there, so there's always going to be some residual product. what I want to do is make sure we have language in there that if we do find it's feasible to go with this anaerobic digestion, our volumes are going to drop, and I want a mechanism in there that we can adjust this to say, if my volume drops by 30%, I'm going to take 30% less leachate, and they're going to pay for any excess.
Councilor Thibault Munoz.
So thank you, but I got my question answered already. Thank you.
And I guess the only comment I'd make, again, it pertains to the retained earnings and the way the rates have gone up, and the fact that the council doesn't make the vote for how the rates go up. I mean, they took in as much up front as they possibly could, which jacked the rates up to where they are very painfully right now. And those are the kind of decisions that were made by the council when you looked at how we could have raised them gradually and come to the same result and not have impact people right off the bat like we did in order to get the retained earnings up front. So I think that was some of the reason why it was better for the council to make those decisions as opposed to a body that has no responsibility to the taxpayers because, or the ratepayers, because we can balance things and they don't really care. They want, the money is up front for the wastewater. It was best for what the wastewater wants to do, but it may not be best for what the city needed to do. So I think that's another reason why it's another argument that the city council needs to get back to being the ones that determine the rates for wastewater. Just my argument. Motion made and second to adjourn. Councilor Boisvert?
I have one quick announcement. This coming Wednesday is the third annual DPW Days that will be held down at the DPW yard from 2 to 5 o'clock. It's a great opportunity for the younger residents of the city of Fitchburg to come down and look at the equipment and see what it looks like, and, you know, get up close and actually, in some cases, actually run a couple of pieces of equipment. It's a good time, and hopefully we'll have a good turnout. Thank you.
What's the time on that?
2 to 5.
2 to 5. Motion made and second to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.